Stitch this and tell me about an adult book you read when you were way too young for it. I'll go first. Hands down, it is the Flowers in the Attic series by V.C. Andrews. This is a story of a brother and sister who fall in love, get married, have kids. Those kids fall in love with each other and also eventually, I think, get pregnant and have kids. And the grandmother, who is just sick of all this incest, locks these kids up in an attic, right? And where they escape. Anyway, my mother I'm sure she had no idea I was reading this in her bookshelf when I was 8 years old, but it really did set a tone. Stitch this and tell me about an adult book you read when you were way too young for it.
So pretty much my entire personality when I was a little kid was that I loved to read. And at our elementary school, they would test us at the beginning of the year to see what our reading level was, and then you were supposed to read books from the library in your reading level. They all had like colored stickers on them so you knew which color you were looking for. When I was in second grade, I tested at a 12th grade reading level, which we know now is not really how reading comprehension works, but whatever. That's the category I was given. And at an elementary school library, there weren't that many books in that category, so I blew through most of them pretty quickly. So my second grade teacher, probably in an effort to shut me up, she was not terribly invested in her job, pulled a book with the right color sticker out, kind of at random, and gave it to me and was like, "You should read this." So I said, okay, and I took it and I put it in my backpack and I went home and I took it out of my backpack and I started reading it in the kitchen, and my mother looked at me and said, "What is that?" It was Dracula. It was Bram Stoker's Dracula. I was 8.
Stitch this and tell me about an adult book you read when you were way too young for it.
So, excuse me for not having the full collection, because as soon as my mother promptly read what I was reading, she threw it off a cliff, as she probably should, but, Chobits. Now, Chobits is a book about, personal computers, and it looks all pretty, and, the girls wear pretty dresses, and everything's all pretty, until you actually start to read the book, and it's just, oh, where's the on switch? Where's the on switch? Oh, I should not have read this at 8 years old.
Stitch this and tell me about an adult book you read when you were way too young for it.
Hello. I think I might win this one because when I was 11, I read a book called The Summer of Naked Swim Parties, and it ruined my life, and I'm still not the same person after it. Basically, the plot of this book, it's like 1976. This girl is 14 years old, and she's just having a coming of age story where her parents happen to be nudists. She's having, relations for the first time, stuff like that. But there is an assault scene. There's a baby who drowns and dies in it. And at the end, even though she's literally R-worded pages before and is in a very, very bad depressive episode, there is no healing from it. Nothing good comes out of it. It just kind of happens and then it's there. It was very confusing for me. It was not good.
Stitch this and tell me about an adult book you read when you were way too young for it.
Oh god. I really did not think TikTok was gonna out me like this today, but it's okay. It was a poor choice on my part, but I was 9.
Stitch this and tell me about an adult book you read when you were way too young for it.
So when I was a kid, I was obsessed with Anne Boleyn, and I would also read anything I could get my hands on. And when I was 10, my mom was into Philippa Gregory, who writes Tudor-era erotica, and so I saw The Other Boleyn Girl on her bedside table, and I stole it, and I started reading it, and my mom very appropriately was like, that is not a book for children. So she took it, and she hid it at the top of her closet, but I scaled her closet at 10 years old, and I got it, and I hid it under my bed, and I would read it at night under the covers with a flashlight, and it was definitely not appropriate for 10-year-olds. I read it, so many times. And now I'm gay.
Get that motivation. I try to hold my patience, but some days I'm just waiting. Yeah, these demons are sucking my energy. I'll be something that I'll never be. I'm on my own path like it's meant to be. I'm doing this for me so cleverly, racing all my memories. Be a legend like J.F. Kennedy. Give a dharma just like Jeffrey. Not putting my future in jeopardy. Nah.
Stars come crashing down on me. Now I know times have changed. It's liberating time to hold these stars. My heart feels unchained. Life so calm. I feel
Ditch this and tell me about an adult book you read when you were way too young for it. I'll go first.
The Notebook Girls. This is a book I checked out when I was 11. It is a real-life diary written by these 4 women back when they were in high school in 2001 in New York. And hearing that, you'd be like, oh, so it talks a lot about 9/11. There's exactly one entry about it. The rest of it is all about sex and drugs. There was also another real-life diary that a woman in her 30s published from when she was a teen that was also a lot about sex and drugs. I don't remember the name of it. All I remember is that she kept wanting to lose her virginity, and then she ended up losing it on her 18th birthday. And she said very specifically, if everyone had signs over their heads constantly saying whether or not they'd lost their virginity, and I sat down at the table this evening with that, my parents would be very surprised. By the way, if anyone knows what that book is called, please let me know.
Ditch this and tell me about an adult book you read when you were way too young for it.
In the 5th grade, I took the cover of Twilight off of its hardcover and put it over 50 Shades of Grey and read it in class.
Ditch this and tell me about an adult book you read when you were way too young for it. I'll go first.
So when I was 13, I was a big fan of Anne Rice, and my mom knew it, would buy me the next book whenever I finished one. And so she had found out that Anne Rice wrote under Anne Reclaire. The first book she brought home was Exit to Eden. And if anybody knows about Exit to Eden, it is an island paradise full of pony people and lots of BDSM. This started out my lifelong fascination, and as soon as I was done reading it, I asked her to buy me any more books from Anne Reclaire. The next set she brought home was The Claiming of Sleeping Beauty, the Sleeping Beauty trilogy, and let me say, I devoured those at the tender age of 13. The funny thing is my mom asked to read them when I was done with them because she liked the other books, and I conveniently lost them.
Ditch this and tell me about an adult book you read when you were way too young for it. I'll go first.
Lauren De Stefano's The Chemical Gardens trilogy. Wither, Fever, and Sever, or maybe the last 2 are vice versa. These books, I think they were kind of popular when I was growing up. I saw them a lot then, but I never hear anyone talking about them now. They fit perfectly into that dystopian young adult fiction genre that was very popular, like the most popular when I was in high school, when Hunger Games and Divergent and those books were coming out. But these books are basically The Handmaid's Tale for teenagers. I read them when I was 14, so it's been a while, but let me try to jog my memory and describe the plot to you. So science had advanced to the point where there was an entire generation of people that had extended lifespans. They lived to like 200 years, I think, around that ballpark. They were immune to almost all forms of disease, no cancer, nothing. They weren't immortal, but they were damn close. This generation started having kids and realized their kids will die once they turn 20. I think it's 20 for women and 25 for men. So what this causes is a Handmaid's Tale-like situation where girls of childbearing age are often sold and or kidnapped off of the streets to be bought by rich families and forced into polygamous marriages for the purpose of bearing children to these men. Except if women die at 20, a lot of these forced brides are literally children. The main character is 16 and she is kidnapped and forced into one of these marriages with 2 other girls, one who is 19, 20, very close to dying already, and one who's 13. Because this is a young adult book and the author still wants the husband to be a viable romantic interest for the main character, they try to redeem him a little by making his father or grandfather, he's really old so I don't know, the evil guy who kidnapped these girls, and the husband doesn't know that they were kidnapped. He thought they agreed to this, and they just never communicate that for some reason. And the main character's like, get away from me, I don't want to touch you, and he's like, okay, I'll wait until you're ready. But the 13-year-old girl, she's been groomed for this, practically. And she's like so excited. She's like, wow, this is just like a fairy tale. He's like my Prince Charming. I'm gonna be a perfect wife. You know, like a kid who grew up on Disney movies and is still a child. And she gets pregnant more than one time in just the first book. These books have abduction, human trafficking, child pregnancy. And there was a scene in the 3rd book that really stuck with me. where a character was doing medical experiments, essentially on fertility, and the main character sees a girl who I believe was only 15 or 16 strapped to a bed in this like dingy medical complex with a bulging stomach because she's been forcibly impregnated for an experiment. The experiments were to see if they could like increase the chances of twins or triplets or make pregnancy shorter. This was a book for teenagers.
Stitch this and tell me about an adult book you read when you were way too young for it.
My dad was very adamant that if I wanted to read something, he wasn't going to censor what I wanted to read because he was just really excited that I enjoyed reading. So we went to the bookstore together a lot. When I was like 12, we went and I saw a display for a Stephen King novel. It's called Everything's Eventual. And I was like, Dad, I want this book. He was like, are you sure? Stephen King's a horror writer. It might be a little too much for you. And I was like, no, I want it. And he was like, okay. So Everything's Eventual is a series of short stories. And the very first short story in that book is about a man that everybody thinks is dead, but he's not, and they're preparing him for an autopsy. The second story is about a little boy who meets the devil, and it is called Man in the Black Suit. And I will never forget it because in 6th grade, I wrote a book report on it, and the teacher wanted to have a meeting with my mom. But to be fair, nobody was surprised. My dad had bought me the complete works of Edgar Allan Poe for Christmas when I was 11, so this wasn't anything new.
Tell me about an adult book you read when you were way too young for it.
I'm Russian, so all classic literature that you have to read for school, that's it. It's traumatizing.